Betrayal doesn't arrive like a storm, it moves like fog, soft, inevitable, swallowing the landmarks until you don't know where home is anymore. My name is Iris Monroe. 33. I am a wedding planner, irony not lost on me. Someone who can turn chaos into choreography and make promises look like they will last forever. I believed in timelines, in color palettes, in place cards that led everyone exactly where they belonged. I believed in him, too. Ethan Voss. He was the photographer who made couples look like they were bathed in mourning, who kissed my wrist when I couldn't sleep, who said forever like a vow he had already practiced. And then there was Riley Hart. She had been my friend since college, the reckless half to my measured whole. She lived as if consequences were just rumors, and I loved her for it. When I told her about Ethan, she said, "Finally, Iris. Someone who understands you." When she met him, she hugged him too long. I chose not to notice. The first fracture was small, a lipstick shade I didn't own on a coffee cup in Ethan's sink, a laugh I recognized floating out of his studio when I arrived too early, a calendar alert on his phone labeled "Our session" at the same time Riley texted me, "Can't make drinks, rain check?" I told myself I was tired. I told myself love had off days. I told myself that trust, once built, could carry its own weight. Trust is heavy. Lies are lighter. They travel faster. On a Wednesday that tasted like metal, I finished staging a rehearsal dinner under lanterns that looked like suspended moons and drove to Ethan's studio with leftover peonies. He wasn't there. The space was too still, the way rooms feel after laughter has slipped under the door and left. I placed the peonies in a vase and caught it, the scent of Riley's perfume, bergamot and night-blooming jasmine, the one she bought after we spent a summer chasing fireflies and promising we would never settle. My chest went cold. I stood at the editing bay and pressed spacebar. His last session flickered to life, light on skin, silk lifting in a staged breeze, a woman's throat arched in laughter. The angle shifted and the image sharpened, Riley's hand on Ethan's shoulder, a ring I knew from years of almost glinting against his jaw. The file name was harmless, 02_studio_test. The timestamp wasn't. I didn't touch anything else. I slid my hands into my coat pockets as if they were restraints and walked out into the night that had the decency to be cruelly bright. I drove to the river, parked under a tree that had watched too many people make bad decisions, and thought about the couples whose vows I had arranged like orchestration, how I had steadied brides who doubted, grooms who trembled, mothers who cried enough for everyone. How I had believed I was immune because I stood behind the curtain with the clipboard and the plan. I stayed until the cold seeped into my bones. I went home and changed the sheets because they still smelled like him and I wanted to believe sleep could be sanitized. And then I made a list on the back of a seating chart. Stop guessing. Find proof. Decide what kind of woman you are. I wasn't naive enough to confront them with rage. Rage is a flare, bright, then gone. I needed something steadier. I needed the kind of fire that looks like candlelight until it reaches the drapes. For a week I did what I do best. I watched. Ethan's texts made soft excuses. Riley sent memes at midnight like tokens for a machine that paid out forgetfulness. I matched times and locations, receipts and silences, their photographs and my memory. I learned the path of their orbit and where it overlapped mine. When I smiled at either of them, it felt like covering a bruise with foundation. On Friday, a client, Anya, nervous and kind, asked for a last-minute site check at a glass-walled rooftop venue that turned the city into a jewelry box. I walked the perimeter with my clipboard and counted outlets while the manager talked about liability and linens. Across the street, Ethan's studio lights glowed. Two silhouettes moved against the blinds. One laughed, the sound thin and high. The laugh made the hair on my arms rise. I asked to see the bridal suite so the manager would stop watching me watch the view. Back on the street, I texted Riley, "Can you meet tonight? I need advice." She replied instantly, "Of course. Your place." I typed, "Studio. Yours and mine." She liked the message, then sent a heart I couldn't unsee. I didn't go. I walked to the Atelier instead, a hotel lobby near the park that smelled like cedar and money, where a pianist made sad sound expensive. I ordered tea I didn't drink and wrote a second list. How to end a love story without becoming the villain. How to burn something without choking on the smoke. How to look someone in the eye and choose yourself. At 9:14, Ethan called. I let it ring until it stopped, then opened the voicemail. Hey, love. Studio ran late. Riley swung by to drop a lens. Still here, editing. Come if you're up. I stared at the words until they blurred, then saved the message like evidence, a small poisonous gem. The next day, I asked my assistant, Tamsin, to help me scout a florist. She didn't ask questions until we were 2 blocks from the studio. She watched me watching the door and said, very gently, "Do you want me to pretend I don't know?" "I want to see who I am," I said. We stood across the street like tourists of our own lives. At noon, Riley emerged with her hair in a loose knot, face bare of guilt and makeup, wearing Ethan's sweater, the one I had bought because he said cool mornings felt like unfinished thoughts. She locked the door, sent a text, smiled at the reply, and walked toward the park. 3 minutes later, Ethan followed, camera bag slung over his shoulder, key in his mouth, the sweater gone. He turned left, not right. Not toward me. Toward a different version of himself. It is a particular kind of grief to see the person you love make a choice you cannot forgive while they look like themselves. I didn't confront them then. I followed the path they took, down to the carousel where children spun into brief, perfect blurs, past the artist who cut profiles with scissors, to the bench under the honey locust where we once said that honesty was our religion. They sat close the way people do when they think the world is an audience that doesn't know them. Riley rested her head on his shoulder. Ethan kissed her hair. He said something that made her cover her mouth with her hand, the way she used to when we were roommates, and she said anything worth regretting. Tamsin touched my arm. "We should go." "I need one more thing," I said. That night, I sent a group text. "Dinner on Sunday? My place. I have news." I made it reckless and ordinary. Riley replied first, stringing exclamation points. Ethan sent a thumbs up. I placed my phone face down like it might watch me while I arranged the trap. If love is a house, trust is the load-bearing wall. When it cracks, you evacuate or you reinforce. I wasn't leaving. I wasn't patching, either. On Sunday morning, I set the table for 3. I cooked the pasta he liked, the salad she pretended to like, opened wine from the trip we never took. I wore a dress that made me look like the kind of woman who will forgive you so you will confess more. I placed a small black notebook next to my plate, pages numbered, bullet points precise. When they arrived together, too comfortable, too bright, I hugged them both and wondered if they heard the hammering in my chest. Riley wandered to the balcony. Ethan hovered in the kitchen, hand brushing my hip like a reflex. "You look beautiful," he said, careful. "So do you," I said, meaning it and not meaning it. He leaned in for a kiss I dodged without making it look like I did. He noticed. He always noticed what he could use. We ate. We talked about weather and work and nothing. I let the silence stretch between the words until it hummed. Finally, I set down my fork and looked at both of them like a judge who has heard enough. "I have news," I said. "I'm not going to marry anyone who lies to me." Riley laughed, startled. Ethan's smile faltered. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, "that when I hire a photographer, I expect him to keep his lens off my best friend. And when I tell my best friend everything, I expect her not to rehearse her alibis in my kitchen." Riley's face drained. Ethan's jaw set, then relaxed into a practiced sadness. "Iris." "Don't," I said. I slid my phone across the table, the screen lighting with photographs I shouldn't have had, him and her at the studio, in the park, in the reflection of a window that didn't know it was a witness. I plan weddings. I organize timelines. I know what still here, editing looks like and what it doesn't. Riley's hands trembled. "It wasn't." "It was," I said. "And I'm not asking why. I'm asking you both to leave." Ethan leaned forward, voice soft. "We made a mistake." I smiled the way I do at vendors who double bill. "You made a sequence of decisions." He dropped the act, just for a flash. "You can't ruin me over this." "Ruin you?" I tilted my head. "Ethan, I don't have to ruin you. I just have to tell the truth." I stood, gathered their plates, and carried them to the sink because my hands needed a job that wasn't shaking. When I turned, Riley was crying the way she cried in college when she didn't get what she wanted. Softly, beautifully, as if tears were an argument. "Please," she whispered. "Please don't hate me." "I'll decide later," I said. "Tonight I'm busy." "What are you busy with?" Ethan asked, wary now, finally seeing the outline of something he couldn't crop. I picked up the small black notebook and traced the spiral with my finger. "With being the kind of woman who doesn't just get hurt." He laughed. "Humorless. What does that even mean?" My phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. The message read, "If you're going to take them apart, start with the truth he keeps under the floorboards at the studio. Look for the loose plank by the safe." I met Ethan's eyes and smiled like a secret. "It means I'm done setting tables for people who come here to feed on me." The studio was dark when I arrived the next morning. The blinds were closed, but the faint outline of the safe stood against the far wall, just where I remembered. My heart raced with every step I took across the room, though no one was there. The silence pressed down on me like it was waiting. I found the plank almost immediately. It was a fraction lighter in color than the others, edges slightly worn from use. My fingers slid under and pulled. The wood lifted easily. Beneath it, wrapped in canvas, was a folder thick enough to make me pause. Inside were contracts, invoices, and receipts. Not wedding photos or rental agreements. Money transfers, hidden accounts, signed in Ethan's hand. But scattered among them were photographs too. Polaroids, quick snapshots. Couples I didn't know. Women alone. All of them smiling at him. Some of them looked barely older than I had been when we met. I shoved the folder back into place and returned the plank. My chest felt hollow and burning at once. This wasn't just betrayal. It was a pattern. I wasn't the first, and I wouldn't have been the last. That night I sat on my balcony with the city buzzing below me, the folder now on my lap, opened like a wound. I thought of Riley, of her laughter in the studio, her head on his shoulder. Was she just another name on his list, or something else? Did she know what she was a part of? I wanted to believe she was blind, like I had been. But Riley had never been blind. She had always chosen the flame, no matter how many times it burned her. I made another list, the neat handwriting steadier than I felt. 1. Do not confront until I know everything. 2. Copy documents, save evidence. 3. Decide who to destroy first. By Sunday, the copy shop attendant gave me a look I pretended not to notice as I ran the folder through the scanner. I left with a flash drive in my pocket and the weight of choices pressing harder on me than ever before. Later that night, Riley called. Her voice was soft, practiced. "Iris, are you okay? You've been quiet." I stared at the drive in my palm. "I'm fine," I said. "Just busy." She sighed with the kind of familiarity that used to comfort me. "Don't disappear on me, please." Her plea wasn't about me. It was about keeping her secret intact. And in that moment I knew she was no victim. When the call ended, I pulled out my notebook again. This time, I didn't write a list. I wrote a single sentence. "They think I am standing still." I closed the book and looked out at the skyline, lights flickering like stars trapped in glass. In just a few days, Ethan and Riley had turned my life into something unrecognizable. But I was not going to let it collapse around me. They had written me into their story like the quiet friend who never fights back. They forgot who plans the endings. The next week blurred into rehearsals, tastings, and endless client calls. Yet beneath the surface I carried the secret like a second pulse. Every smile I gave, every flower arrangement I approved, every speech I rehearsed for nervous groomsit all hid the fact that I was quietly mapping my revenge. I met Ethan for coffee on Wednesday. He looked like the man I once loved, hair tousled, camera bag slung over his shoulder, eyes pretending to be tender. He kissed my cheek and asked if I was sleeping. I told him yes. I lied so easily it startled me. When he excused himself to take a call, I reached across the table and slid his phone closer. No passcode. He never thought he needed one with me. I scrolled fast messages with Riley, hidden under initials and inside jokes. My stomach knotted, But I focused. Photos of cash deposits, invoices, addresses I didn't recognize. He wasn't just cheating. He was laundering money through jobs I never knew he had. Weddings that didn't exist. Brides and grooms who were just names on fake contracts. When he came back, I was stirring my coffee like nothing had happened. He kissed my hand. I smiled as though I still believed him. That night I called Riley. "Drinks tomorrow?" I asked, voice sweet. She hesitated, then agreed. We met at a rooftop bar she always loved, with its neon glow and cheap champagne. She talked too much, laughed too hard, like guilt was a stain she couldn't scrub out. I listened, nodded, and let her dig her own grave. She admitted Ethan was unhappy, that he felt trapped, that I was too perfect and he needed someone who understood his flaws. Her words cut but also revealed the truth. She thought she had replaced me. She thought I was already gone. When I went home, I opened the flash drive. I organized everything into folders. Photos, contracts, transfers, messages. I labeled them by date, by name, by amount. I was building something solid, something undeniable. Still, a part of me trembled. Not because I feared losing them, I already had, but because of what came next. Love, once betrayed, can't be resurrected. But betrayal can be weaponized. By Friday I knew my next move. A wedding was scheduled at the city courthouse, small and quiet, and Ethan was the hired photographer. Riley texted me that morning, saying she was busy with errands. I went anyway, standing in the back, invisible. Ethan arrived late, breathless, charming as always. I watched him laugh with the clerk, pose the couple, snap photos that made strangers look like saints. Then, while he worked, I slipped into his car. I knew where he kept the spare key. Inside his glove compartment, wrapped in an envelope, was another memory card. I slid it into my pocket and locked the car behind me. That night, at home, I plugged it into my laptop. The images loaded one by one. Not weddings. Not clients. Riley. Always Riley. Her smile too familiar, her body draped across his studio floor, their faces pressed together like a confession. The proof was complete. I shut the laptop and stared at my reflection in the window. For weeks, I had been surviving. Tonight, I decided I would stop surviving and start dismantling. Sunday night I set the stage. Not at my apartment this time, but at the same rooftop bar where Riley had spilled her half-confession. I reserved a private corner, ordered a bottle of champagne I didn't intend to drink, and sent 2 separate texts, one to Ethan, one to Riley. Each believed they were meeting me alone. Ethan arrived first, casual, smug. He kissed my cheek, as if routine could erase everything. "What's the occasion?" he asked, loosening his jacket like he owned the night. "Closure," I said. Riley walked in minutes later, faltering when she saw him. Her laugh bubbled up, nervous, wrong. "Oh, both of us?" "Yes," I said, pouring 3 glasses. My hands didn't shake. We Saturday. For a moment, it almost looked normal, like old friends sharing a drink. Then I slid my laptop onto the table. The folder marked Truth glowed on the screen. I clicked it open. Photo after photo, document after document, scrolled before them. Their faces shifted, first denial, then fear. Riley's hand covered her mouth. Ethan's jaw tightened. "You kept everything?" he asked, voice low. "I build weddings out of details," I said. "Did you really think I wouldn't build a case out of yours?" Riley leaned forward. "Iris, please." "No," I said, my voice cutting like glass. "You don't get to please me anymore. You both wanted secrets. Now you'll live in them." I slid 2 sealed envelopes across the table. One for him, one for her. Inside are copies of everything. The finances, the photos, the messages. If either of you ever tries to use my name, my work, my trust again, these will find their way to people who matter more than me. Employers. Clients. Families. Ethan's face drained of color. Riley whispered, "You wouldn't." I looked at her, calm. "You thought I wouldn't find out. And yet, here we are." Silence stretched. The music from the bar swelled, careless and loud. I stood, leaving the champagne untouched. As I walked away, Ethan hissed, "This isn't over." I turned back, smiling for the first time in weeks. For me, it is. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I lay in bed, eyes open, listening to the silence that finally belonged to me. And I realized something. Revenge wasn't always fire and destruction. Sometimes, it was simply refusing to carry someone else's lies anymore. But then, just as sleep began to blur the edges of my resolve, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. The message read, "You think it's finished. But you don't know the half of it. Check the folder he keeps hidden under clients_2023. That's where the real betrayal lives." My breath caught. My hand hovered over the screen. Had I only scratched the surface? The next morning, I sat at my desk with my laptop open, staring at Ethan's backup drive I had quietly copied weeks ago. The anonymous text kept echoing in my head. Clients_2023. My pulse hammered as I clicked through the folders. At first, it looked harmless. Contracts, invoices, standard photography files. But then, buried under an innocuous subfolder, I found it images and documents he had hidden, labeled with initials I didn't recognize. Faces of women, not brides or grooms, but clients who had come to him alone. Their photos weren't professional, they were intimate, unguarded, stolen. Notes scribbled alongside them revealed payment transfers, fake invoices, and instructions written in Ethan's voice. He had used his camera not just to capture weddings, but to trap people, blackmail them, and bleed them dry. Riley's name was there too. Multiple times. Not as a victim, but as a participant. She had helped coordinate meetings, handle money, and cover the gaps. She hadn't just betrayed me for love, she had betrayed me for profit. The betrayal was bigger than I had imagined. My stomach twisted as I realized they hadn't just destroyed me emotionally, they had tried to use me as a shield. My company, my reputation, my network could have been the perfect cover if I had stayed blind. By evening, I had made my choice. I printed the files, secured digital copies, and drafted a package for the authorities. No dramatic speeches. No confrontation this time. Just cold truth, delivered to the right hands. When the officers came 2 days later, it wasn't me they looked at. It was them. Ethan, furious and pale, as they led him out of his studio in handcuffs. Riley, crying with her hands over her face, trying to act like she hadn't signed her name to transfers and contracts that screamed her guilt. I didn't watch the whole scene. I didn't need to. I turned away, feeling the city lights warm against my skin as if the world was finally on my side. That night, sitting on my balcony again, I opened my notebook. For the first time in weeks, I didn't need a list. I only needed one sentence. This is who I am, the woman who survived. I closed the book and looked out at the city that had been both my stage and my battlefield. Betrayal had come like fog, creeping until I couldn't see. But I had burned through it, not with rage, but with clarity. Ethan and Riley were gone. My life was mine again. And in the silence that followed, I realized that was the sweetest revenge of all.